Far Cry is one versatile series: unethical scientific experimentation, absurdism behind a savage war, slavery in a land of hallucinogens, stench of politics and tradition, good old religious fanaticism, ancient gene-deep struggle for bare life. But all of these are thematically and aesthetically complex, and it takes quite some time with the game to fully experience and comprehend its aesthetic identity. This is why short, linear games, smaller open worlds, and DLCs can be such sweet experiences. You get to incorporate the game as an aesthetic whole a lot sooner, and the sense of control is more immediate. This is the case with Blood Dragon. Reduction is the main principle behind its design. Smaller scale and realistic financial expectations can have a positive effect on creativity. Less serious tone helps in this case as well. Amongst difficult choices and emotional stories, there is a place for a video game that doesn't aspire to be anything else other than a video game. Science fiction has been a fruitful genre, giving rise through the decades to many subgenres with different aesthetic variations and derivatives. We might try to force Blood Dragon into the subgenre of cyberpunk, but it wouldn't make a particularly tight fit. It lacks some depth and an edge that cyberpunk has developed in the past few decades, such as a heavy social commentary through societal collapse and transhumanism. It combines the elements of cyberpunk, apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic sci-fi, zombie fiction, alternate history, dystopian fiction, and retrofuturism, with varying degrees of implementation of each of these subgenres. This game has nothing of the serious, mature Far Cry themes. No wilderness as a backdrop for a mature story, philosophical monologues, man versus nature conflict. No insane characters. Well, I take this one back. In Far Cry 3, protagonist's identity took a significant part in the story. In Blood Dragon, you get to be the prototype of an ideal American hero, one without any nuance or subtlety, one that doesn't doubt himself, has no moral dilemmas, and doesn't do drugs, unlike Jason or AJ. Sergeant Rex Power Colt is a beautiful caricature of a hero with no thematic baggage. He exists because we are used to avatars shooting cool guns having a name and an implication of an identity, a dear and fading memory of an era behind a pair of hands pulling triggers, spouting out cheesy lines spoken by Michael Biehn, a living specimen of the bygone era. But he also exists as an excuse to write lines such as this. More personality than Deputy, less trauma than Jason. The whole game is practically an exercise in reduction of a visual identity of a video game. Built on top of Far Cry 3, it becomes something altogether different. The only similarity being mechanical through animations and practical through props. Essentially, it is a different game. It's more different from Far Cry 3 than Far Cry 4 is. Everything is simplified and reduced, from story to gameplay, and this brevity has the desired effect. A clear aesthetic identity and in turn specific feel and experience. As if someone had slammed the new shining armor on Far Cry 3's skeleton. It is as much a Far Cry game as Counter-Strike was Half-Life, but jeeps and hang gliders are still there, the DNA of the franchise. Dissecting this Frankenstein of a game produces few distinctive ingredients. Mechanics and props from Far Cry 3, amalgamation of 80s aesthetics smelling far and wide from a burnt melting pot, and a sneering, ironic self-awareness aimed at the history of conventional video game design. Pour these three in whatever order and you'll arrive behind that minigun while long tall Sally blasts off into your headphones non-diegetically, showing us how deep visual impact of the Vietnam War is. It had managed to translate many of these serious survival elements from Far Cry 3 into its own neon-plagued vision. Cybernetic heart instead of a handful of guts, neon Tento instead of a traditional one, cyber sharks and neon snakes. What a catalog of hilariousness. That distinctive Far Cry physicality of hand animation survives, but it's changed to fit the overall goofiness. The game's style follows the radical designs from the 80s with rules such as impracticality, impulsive use of color, and extreme confidence in the final design. Its aesthetic identity pours over every aspect of the game, from props to the way you use them, from mechanics to story, violence, colors, irony, everything is cranked up. The game still heavily relies on everything it mocks. It just brings a dose of satisfaction with ultra self-aware comments that really highlight the absurdity of many video game design conventions. hours, and the game's length hits sweet spots all over my mind. One campaign mission more would be too much. The story doesn't even matter. It's a recycled package of 80s cinema held together by Far Cry 3's engine. Extremely emotional and manly friendship, painful betrayal, seductive doctor, evil scientist. These archetypes in their bare forms have existed from the dawn of mankind, but the exaggeration they had gone through during the 80s is unique in such a goofy way that it's almost cringy. All Far Cry games have political undertones and philosophical aspirations. Blood Dragon has none of that, despite the story of nuclear war between USA and Russia and Second Vietnam War. Nuclear annihilation of Canada is presented as filler content. These imaginary conflicts bear no political consequence. They're just dead words, not an ounce of thematic weight. You end up saving the world by the end of the game, but you never feel like that. There's no grandiose theme behind gameplay carnage, no intent of social commentary of any kind. It is literally as if cliches woke up one day after thinking a thought for themselves for the first time and started walking around. It doesn't feel stupid since it doesn't take itself seriously. It is the comic relief of the Far Cry series, and it has more in common with Wolfenstein and Doom than the rest of the Far Cry games. It sits right there between an homage, mockery, and exploitation. Neither of the Far Cry 5 DLCs does manage to pull off such autonomous aesthetic, and this is the best example showing us that the aesthetics don't just rely on authentic props and environment, but a unifying vision behind design that affects every element of the game. It is hard to create visual identities for things, and Blood Dragon pulls it off in a sneaky way, ripping off an aesthetic from the past. Most similar design concept that comes to mind would be Cuphead, where this indulgence in the aesthetics of the past is shown with similar vigor. We are used to thinking of the post-apocalypse in terms of our own predicaments. Weather, politics, nuclear wars, evil AI. Although humanity's fears are primordial and always similar, post-apocalypse in the 80s had been envisioned differently. The game was released in 2013, but its post-apocalypse takes place in the dark ages of 2007. Hilarious exercise in retro-futurism and retro-fetishism. This very exercise of going back in time and trying to envision the future that had already taken place is something we don't see that often. Games are usually either independent futurism, familiar present, or archetypal and well-known past. Blood Dragon had set out to recreate the 80s vision of post-apocalypse, and the result was an amalgamation of different aesthetics: neon, cyber, bionic, primal, retro. Each word bears visual consequences in Blood Dragon. Plains of purple and skies of pink, on an island featuring everything from primal architecture to futuristic labs, inhabited by cyborgs, running dead, and blood dragons. That's where you get to play. Going to an unnamed island to kill a rogue agent just shows how universal Joseph Conrad's book is. It has even made its way into neon dystopian future. Cult of the Blood Dragon isn't even hinted at, and I'm perhaps inventing it right now, but there is a glimpse of possibility of worship due to post-apocalyptic reverting to primordial roots. After all hope is lost, bare bones signifying the persistence of death is the only hope and comfort for the living. This is interesting because there was a trend of films featuring this mixture of primal and futuristic visual elements, and it was neither Mad Max post-apocalypse fashion nor cyberpunk low-life high-tech aesthetic. It was something else altogether. Two visual extremes, pure nature and modern technology, new barbarism with robots, cyber barbarism, Conan meeting Blade Runner, subgenre derivative interrupted. The most concrete manifestation of this aesthetic would be the character of Predator itself, technologically advanced extraterrestrial species with long nails and no clothes, and a propensity for human trophy collecting, primitive and advanced at the same time. He-Man would be another example. Sloan's vision of the future is just filler content, and despite his motivation for turning world back to its prehistoric state, constituting a peculiar kind of hatred for everything modern, it bears no thematic weight. The rest of the game does not permit it. But Blood Dragon briefly shows one striking image that sums up the consequences of the apocalypse having an apocalypse. The graffiti-stained visage of the Lady Liberty, an implication of societal breakdown giving birth to cynicism daring enough to desecrate the new Colossus. Blood Dragon almost has historic value considering how spot-on certain uber cliches are implemented. Chopper and minigun sequence, motivation by revenge, training montage, gearing up, zombie variation, sex scene, happy ending, plot twist after the happy ending. It is a small archive of cliches, an interactive museum of the VHS era. When we think about the historicity of video games, Blood Dragon captures history a bit differently from, let's say, Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed 3 is a 2012 game about American Revolution, and it captures the setting with an objective and precise eye, artistic only in imitation. It's like a live photograph of the era. Architecture, clothing, accents, it's all there. It can never replace the actual experience of living in those times or growing up at the time and then remembering it later, but it can rival other forms of art when it comes to the representation of a bygone aesthetic. Blood Dragon does something else with history. It reimagines a vision of the future from the past, a future which we had already lived and saw no pink mushroom cloud over the horizon. Retro-futuristic love letter to the fears of the past. Our 2007 wasn't anything special. To think that in the 80s they used to envision 2007 in such a way is bizarre. Blood Dragon appropriates the art of cheesy one-liners that ruled the 80s cinema, and to deliver such lines with a straight face must have been a fun experience. I find it enjoyable to listen to this deep, ironic, almost cowboy voice speak out these cheesy lines as if quoting from a holy book of neon, the art of cheese. When all of its aesthetic peculiarities are combined with repainted Far Cry 3 mechanics, the aesthetics of playing the game constitutes a quite unique feel. Shooting is incredibly fun and feel-good. Exaggerated ricochet and blood splatter make every hit or miss noticeable and satisfying in stylized explosions of color around the point of the impact. Muzzle flash is blinding. Movement is fluid and seamless. It offers no barriers to this neon mayhem. Guns are kept up while running. There's a special animation when bringing them up. Enthusiastic reload animations are that detailed touch that makes a difference. Healing animations are brilliantly adopted and feel like an ironic homage to the original grittiness of Far Cry 2. The game is designed with fun in mind. Crafting is gone, leveling up is simplified. Binoculars and tagging are integrated into the cyborg lore. Sergeant Rex comes ready with powers and skills Jason had to learn. Less choice over less hours for more intense fun. That's the goal thereafter, to capture the excitement of Far Cry 3 firefights and pump it with filters from 80s archive of aesthetics. In that sense, the game answers to all mechanical challenges of Far Cry 3, translating the aesthetic identity from this to this with considerable visual effect. Both aesthetics and mechanics, unique and ripped off as they are, blend together in an experience that creates a special kind of feel. Luckily, there was already this whole movement in music called synthwave, providing an outlet for the imitation and appreciation of 80s atmosphere. In the internet churches of Outrun and Retrowave, there was a safe space for the nostalgic celebration of an era, even for those born in decades with much less neon. Power Glove provided critically acclaimed soundtrack, brilliantly sampling many of the already existing and widely popular movie soundtracks. All guns are references to popular sci-fi classics of the 80s, and they fit this old-school shooter rather well. It is an interesting experience to be able to actually use these iconic firearms. Pink Tanto and Shuriken are, I guess, mandatory variation considering how ninja-themed films have exploded during the 80s. AJM-9 is an homage to 1987 Robocop's heavily modified Beretta 93R called Auto 9. It is the first opportunity to use this piece of film history in a digital world. Phrasetron is inspired by the plasma rifle from Terminator 2. Modding it turns it into a laser rifle and changes the look significantly, from a burst-fire submachine gun to a full-auto laser gun. Galleria 1991 is almost an exact replica of the sawed-off Winchester 1887 from Terminator 2. Rex fires it casually over his mechanical hand. Reload animation includes flipping each shell in with his thumb. That flip cock is what you see when you open the dictionary and follow down the page with your finger to the word cool. The game uses details such as this to capture the essence of the era it appropriates. Cobra Assault Cannon from Robocop 2 is featured as heavily modifiable Cobra Khan. In reality, it is a Barrett 82 used way out of its intended purpose for the sake of visual impact. Scope gets progressively larger as new functions are added, and the sniper in the end becomes a rocket launcher. Terror 4000 is prominently used in both Predator and Terminator 2, so you might as well take your own pick at what film it is actually referencing. Rex unleashes a war cry while covering the horizon with lead. Some of the modifications for these weapons change their purpose or looks completely. Well, perhaps not the purpose. They start off as overpowered. Modding makes them hilarious. 4-barrel sawed-off lever-action semi-automatic shotgun. I don't think such a thing even exists in any other fiction besides Blood Dragon. It probably did a lot of preposterous things first without us even noticing. These modifications are over the top and truly capture the spirit of the game. And despite being preposterous from the technical side, the game nonchalantly offers a real in-game modification to the gun, like the rotating hammers on Galleria or that gigantic suppressor on AJM9. When you add fire rounds to the quadruple barrel sawed-off shotgun, that's the final statement about what sort of a game you're trying to make. After that, there's no need for any sort of review or analysis. Everything is set. There are many works of art that require a certain degree of knowledge in order to be fully appreciated. Sometimes it's science, other times it's other works of art or history. I think anyone can enjoy the atmosphere of Far Cry 2, but the most complete and thorough experience will be by those who have read and taken some time to process the Heart of Darkness. Sometimes it's just a nod to another work, a passing reference that brings a smile to your face, and sometimes it permeates the whole work. I don't think we can fully appreciate the aesthetic of Blood Dragon without at least being familiar with visual influences that constitute its building blocks. History of video games represents an anthology of film influences, homages, and references, and Blood Dragon is an extreme, bare-bone example of that. Throne, Terminator, and RoboCop are the most obvious inspirations. Setting, characters, dialogue. The general feel largely comes from these three and their lasting cultural impact. But there are countless other influences. Aliens, Predator, Krull, Rocky, Karate Kid, Rambo 3, Commando, and many more. When you look at films such as Commando and Cobra, it's no wonder our cynical age is fascinated with these products from the 80s and their uniquely goofy aesthetics based on a complete lack of self-doubt and hesitation. These films were made for the sake of thrill and action and have produced snippets of artistic semblance forever imprinted on the collective mind, with themes such as social order or machines searching for humanity taking a back seat. The attraction of these films is twofold: lack of maturity and absence of denial of the lack of maturity. Blood Dragon doesn't really do justice to any of these films individually. It appropriates them selectively in an attempt to capture the essence of the era that gave birth to the targeted aesthetic. This game is truly immune to any criticism or praise, since it aspires to achieve nothing. It's neither a commentary nor a mockery nor a lesson, not a single intention of a subversion of any kind. It's not meta compared to anything. It's a video game. You shoot a cyborg in the head and it explodes. That's it. Despite being 6 years old, it still feels like a breath of fresh air. Game has a single downside: you can't carry all weapons at the same time. That's it. I also think that Lovecraftian monster was unnecessary. Too much even for Blood Dragon. With regards to Far Cry 3, you can say that it's an interactive examination of human nature, meta-criticism of video game design. You can theorize that Jason and Voss are one person, that the whole island is an illusion. With Blood Dragon, there's no need to say anything when you can do this. The whole game feels like one giant middle finger aimed from the waist at the waves of serious games exploring mature themes. Blood Dragon gives you a minigun, then it gives you the kill star, then it lets you ride a Dinobot. This level of exaggeration and overpowering is unmatched, a wonderful combination of being self-aware and not taking yourself seriously. It is part of our zeitgeist to overanalyze and project meaning where there's little or none. The whole history of criticism is an exercise in interpreting and projecting. Blood Dragon goes against such inclinations of modern humans. It is almost as if tries hard to present itself as unworthy of thought, only extremely fun to play. Such terrific honesty about the product can be freeing for both developers and players. Just play the damn thing. No thought arising from the experience. No need to. Narrative iceberg. Like 10 minutes ago I talked about the historicity of Blood Dragon's take on the 80s vision of the future. What a comedy. At least I ended up cutting out the bits about the catharsis of self-awareness. Oh my neon god. Just tell them I died for my country. Or winners don't do drugs. That's a good one. I hope we can agree that in this complex world of ours, there are different kinds of good. Far Cry series offers us a couple of them. Blood Dragon is an old school, neon-drenched, fun kind of good. This is way too much words for a 5-hour game. Thanks for watching and have a nice With this, I conclude my take on the Far Cry series for the time being. Far Cry 4 and Primal are still interesting to me aesthetically, but I'll take a break from the series until I see where the next installment takes it. I have presented my take on 3 very unique video games and their aesthetic identities, and now I plan to move on to other similarly unique and interesting series. Wolfenstein, Dishonored, Call of Duty, Spec Ops: The Line, Dead Space, Stalker, Hitman, The Evil Within. The list is long. I will keep on with the long format, mixing carefully edited in-game footage with my own graphics and animations, and I intend to keep up this approach. The reason why this channel exists is the exploration and appreciation of video games, especially when they come close to being an interactive art form. Uploading schedule is non-existent at the time, since I have a day job that takes a lot of time and pays my bills. In case the business model behind my YouTube channel ever gets sustainable enough, I would gladly change it for my current job. I've already started with the script for my Aesthetics of Modern Warfare analysis, and I'm extremely enthusiastic about it. I would like to extend my thanks to everyone watching and appreciating my work, and would like to welcome everyone who joined recently. So, until next time, farewell.